Good morning, world.
Good morning out there. Brian, did you get the vaccine?
I did not get the vaccine because I can't get it until after you.
Why? We're not going to do the race thing today. We're not doing it. Not doing it. We're not talking about the vaccine today. We're going to save that for a later date. I'm sure you guys have heard the names Louis Farrakhan, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, but I bet you haven't heard about the name Walter E. Williams, another giant that we've lost this year. And Brian and I are going to tell you a little bit about the life of Walter E. Williams. I'm Cedric.
And I'm Brian, and this is Cedric and Brian. Hi, Cedric. Yeah, I hadn't heard of Walter Williams until I saw a special with Larry Elder. And then I think when I used to listen to Larry back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think he did mention him. But what does the E stand for?
Well, if you ask Walter, we could ask him. He would tell you that the E stands for excellent. And I got to tell you, after me and Brian did some research on this man, he wasn't far off. He was pretty excellent by his own standards. But the reason you didn't hear about him and other giants like Shelby Steele and Larry Elder and Thomas Sowell, that he was on the wrong side of speech, so he was kind of silenced a little bit.
So what he means by that is that he is a person of color.
Yes.
That was also a person on the right.
Yes. But real quick, give you a quick synopsis. Like Brian said, we're going to show you a few clips, talk about him. You can understand Walter a little bit more. But he was born in West Philadelphia. He was born and raised, I think, on the playground.
Are you going to sing it?
Where he spent most of his days, relaxing, chilling, out cool. Now, anyway, but a little trivia about him. He moved from West Philadelphia to North Philadelphia at the age of 10, and guess who his neighbor was?
Who?
None other than William H. Cosby, Bill Cosby himself.
Really?
And when Bill Cosby talks about some of the characters like Weird Harold and Fat Albert, Walter Williams actually knew those guys because they grew up in the same neighborhood. So he knew Fat Albert or Bill Cosby back in those days in North Philadelphia.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you see these clips, he was a very affluent, very accomplished person, but he wasn't raised that way, right?
No. And we talk a lot about, the biggest problem in the black community is the absentee of the father in the home. Walter Williams was no different. Matter of fact, he said he was an anomaly because he and his sister, they're like one of the few families back then during that time whose father wasn't in the home because it was so weird back then. But despite those circumstances, he went on to accomplish great things. We talk about how we're holding on to racism. And the first clip we're going to show, Walter Williams talks very well about how racism should have died a long time ago, but it's being kept around by a few people. Let's watch this clip.
Racial discrimination and racism in our country could have earned a well-deserved death, but it has been resurrected by race hustlers, or poverty pimps, I call them, such as Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, and many others in the civil rights movement who make a living on the grievances of blacks.
Well, as you can see, Walter talks about how racism should have died a long time ago, and we're holding on to it. And that's why we talk about things like reparations. And even me as a black male, I have no right to receive reparations from something that my great-grandparents went through. And I cannot find a man my age today who knows anything about slavery. Well, we hold on to that. This next clip coming up, Walter talks very well about the state of the welfare state, and how it's tearing apart the black family. Take a listen.
The welfare state has done to black Americans what slavery could not have done, Jim Crow and the harshest racism could not have done, namely to destroy the black family. And many people believe that the route to economic power is to have political power. And there's absolutely no evidence to support that.
Government cannot create a special privilege for one American without simultaneously creating a special disadvantage for some other American.
I love that last quote because he put it in such a way that it just made sense. And if you think about those words, they're so impactful. The government cannot create an advantage for one American without simultaneously creating a disadvantage for another American. It just doesn't work. And me and Brian have talked about this over and over again. There's no such thing as equal outcome because it depends on how hard you want to work. We can have equal opportunity, and that's what Walter Williams is basically talking about during those three quotes. If we have equal opportunity, that's great. How hard you work and how diligently you work will determine your outcome.
This goes along with Marxism and communism, where you're trying to just make everything equal at the end, regardless. But we know what happens, and if you saw our episode on Mao, he killed a lot of people but doing that, he made things more equal, and he actually helped women's rights. But that doesn't negate the fact that he killed a lot of people.
Right.
What you have to do is in this country, unlike China, we do have equal opportunity, and it's up to the individual to take advantage of that.
Right. And I love how he talks about the welfare state. He said there was a time when, like he said, in North Philadelphia, he was without a father in the home. But he said one of the happiest moments in his life is when his mother got remarried. Now, of course, that probably cut off their welfare, but the fact that they had a quote-unquote family structure together again, that made him rise to certain heights. Having that dad in the home really did great things for him.
This is a quick side note, and if you look at people like Don Lemon, who is just going crazy now with how left he's gone, but just go look back a few years when Obama was president, and Don Lemon talked about the biggest problem was the lack of fathers in the home.
Yep.
Yet he will not admit it now.
This next clip that Brian's going to play for us, Walter Williams talks about how salvation cannot be achieved through political power.
This is one of the problems that Black Americans face. That is, many of us,
We feel that we can achieve salvation through the political arena. That is by putting a black person in charge of our lives. And if you ask the question,
in what cities in our country do Black people receive the worst education,
are most insecure in their lives, live under rotten conditions, they are the very cities where a black is the mayor,
the chief of police, the superintendent of schools? And I'm not saying that there's a
causal relationship between that, but I'm saying that there's
not much salvation to be achieved through the political arena.
There are so many times listening to him speak that I wish Walter Williams was a Baptist minister, because I caught myself so many times wanting to yell amen. And he said some things that they were there in front of me, but I never really realized until he said it. And he said it so eloquently. You look at these cities, like some of our major cities, LA, Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, some of the most run down, depleted areas are run by blacks. Mm-hmm. That's where you see the worst education, the police force is terrible. And we turn a blind eye to it, or we just do the magician's trick, or we do something else, say, look over here, and all this nonsense is going on someplace else. This next clip, get ready for another aha moment from Walter as he talks about the government dipping into your pocket.
While I'm against taking one person's money and giving it to another, I'm not against helping our fellow man in need. I think that by reaching into one's own pockets to help one's fellow man in need is praiseworthy and laudable. I think that reaching in somebody else's pockets to help one's fellow man in need is despicable and worthy of condemnation. When God gave Moses the commandment, thou shalt not steal, I'm pretty sure he did not mean thou shalt not steal unless you got a majority vote in the United States Congress. We find many Americans, they love government because government does things that if a private person did the identical thing, he would go to jail. Suppose I see an elderly lady sleeping on a grate in downtown Washington. She's hungry, she needs some medical attention and shelter. And I could walk up to somebody with a gun in my hand, and I could take their $200. And then, having gotten their $200, I can go down and help the lady out. I could buy her some medical attention, some food, and shelter. Would you find me guilty of a crime? I'd be guilty of theft. Suppose I got 3 people to agree with me that I should take somebody's money by force to help the lady out. Would that be a crime? What if I got 1 million people? Or 300 million people, the population of the United States? Would it be a crime? Yes, it would. Now, I believe most Americans could or might agree with me, but here's the problem. Is there any conceptual distinction between that act and when the agents of the United States Congress tells me, well, Walter, you know that $200 that you made last week that you planned to buy a nice bottle of Lafite Rothschild Bordeaux wine with? You will not do that with your money. You'll give to us, and we will go downtown and help the lady out. Is there any distinction between those two acts? None. That is, if you press me for a distinction, the only distinction I can find is the first act where I walked to somebody and took their money. That is illegal theft. The second act, where the agents of Congress took my money, that's just legal theft. It's just a matter of legality. Now, many people might say, well, Williams, it's legal. Well, for moral people, legality alone cannot be our guide. That is, there are many things in this world that were or are legal, but clearly immoral. That is, slavery was legal. Did that make it moral? The Stalinists, Maoists, purges, they were legal, but did they make it moral? So the moral question that we have to ask ourselves, is there a moral case for taking what belongs to the rightful property of one person and giving it to another to whom it does not belong? And in my many years of life, I have not come up with.
All right, so that clip was a bit longer because there was a few things he brought up, but a couple of kind of humorous points that he made, which is good. And one was about Moses and the tablets. Mm-hmm. Thou shalt not steal unless you have a majority. I thought that was a great point because we're trying to equate, in today's society, what they're trying to call as fair and equal because of an outcome. And again, it goes back to what he says, just because, and he brought up the slavery and Mao and all that stuff. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it moral.
Doesn't make it right. Yeah, we're not going to add too much to this because Walter Williams, the teacher in him comes out because it takes a great teacher to take a concept and to put it down to this most basic elementary level so that you go, man, that just makes sense. In this next clip, listen to Walter Williams talk about ratifying the Constitution.
Keep in mind, we have betrayed the founding fathers of our country. I mean, if you look at Federalist Paper 45, when James Madison was writing Federalist Paper 45, he was trying to convince the citizens of New York to ratify the Constitution, and they were afraid to ratify the Constitution. And he said, the powers that we've delegated to the federal government are few and well-defined and restricted mostly to external affairs. The powers left with the people in the state are indefinite and numerous. If you turn that upside down, we have what we have now. The powers of the federal government are indefinite and numerous.
So I love what he says. So, and I know I got one of these for Cedric too. So if you haven't seen these, it's the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. It's a little pocket size. So you can keep it right here, and it has all the amendments. And I'll admit, I'd never read the Declaration of the Constitution all the way through. So I did. I finished it. So, but what he says is so impactful, and it's so opposite of what we're doing today. Just like he said, we're a federalist system. It's supposed to be the states. The federal government is supposed to just basically keep us safe, keep things running smooth. It's not supposed to be top-down government controlling our lives. And that's where we're going, and it's getting worse and worse. And that's how the communists run their countries.
Our next clip, listen to Walter Williams. He talks about things that are government-run, whereas things are run for profit.
The pursuit of profits, in another way to put it. If you ask the question, if you just look around, you look at what do Americans complain about? Well, do we complain about supermarkets? What about our computer stores? Are there a lot of complaints about the clothing stores? No. Where do people complain? They complain about public schools, complain about the post office, the motor vehicles department. Compare. Now, cars and television sets and clothing and supermarkets, they're motivated by profits. The public education, the motor vehicle department, and post office, they're nonprofit organizations. So profit, being profit motivating, is profit motivation gets people to try to please their fellow man, because in a free market they get more for themselves by serving their fellow man.
Well, that was cool. There seems to be a trend there. He talked about the DMV, public schools, and the post office. What are those three entities run by?
Well, not only that, so with private enterprise, like he was talking about cars, TVs, you have some recourse. You can shop a different brand.
Right.
You can complain to the manufacturer, and in most cases, if they're trying to please you, they'll send out a new product,
Right.
or they'll send somebody to fix it. But guess what? If you're at the DMV, they could they could care.
Go to
less.
line number 13 with the other 500 people and wait in line
Yep.
with your complaint form.
Yeah. So those of you who want government-run everything, healthcare, all of it, just think of the DMV, and that's what you're going to get with anything government-run.
Right.
And those of you might say, well, the post office runs fine. We really don't use the post office
use the
anymore.
post office.
When we want to get something, what do we send it through? FedEx or UPS,
Right.
and now Amazon. So
Right.
now this one, it's interesting because this is when we were growing up. This is in the 80s. This is a clip from the 80s.
Right. Right.
And it's about how political power, well, you'll see with this clip.
How much political progress have blacks made in America since the death of Dr. Martin Luther King?
Well, in terms of elective offices, there's been significant political power, political progress. But very often, more often than not, that political power has not been translated into the things that blacks need, like better schools, more safer communities. You know, some of the cities in our country whose mayors and city councilmen are predominantly black, they're some of our cities with the major problems. Now, I personally don't think that political power in and of itself is a solution to the problems. If you look at Japanese Americans who, almost by any socioeconomic measure of socioeconomic success, they stand at the top of the pile in America. Japanese, they don't even have political power in areas where they're the most numerous, such as San Francisco. Or you find Jews in America. Jews, before they established themselves as political contenders, strong political contenders, they had a lot of economic power. Now, on the other hand, if you look at some of the white ethnics, namely the Irish established themselves politically in many of our cities. They ran the machines, but the Irish were the slowest rising among the ethnic groups. So I don't buy the proposition that in order to get economic power, a first-order condition is to get political power. It may be the reverse.
I know this is dated, and back in the 80s, what China has become now is what Japan was then. Japan, basically any stereo system, TV you got, the high-end ones were all from Japan. Now Korea kind of owns that market. But what he said, and you can even look today, do you see a bunch of Koreans running the government?
No.
Yet they're doing fine.
Right. Right.
So-
What I love about someone like a Walter Williams or Larry Elder or Thomas Sowell is that their words stand the test of time. And like Brian said, although that clip was dated back in the 80s, it resonates just as true today as it did back when he first said it.
Yeah.
And if you guys want to think about it, like, when do we have the most divisiveness in our country? And some of you may argue this point, but it was in 2008 when the so-called savior, Barack Obama, was elected into office. That was the inception of BLM and Tifa, and that's when this racial divisiveness really started to infiltrate our country and start to tear us apart. And we thought, well, we got a black guy in office now things are going to be right. Things are going to be great. But nothing could be further from the truth. And just because we stuck some black people in positions of power and positions of authority, we thought that we were going to finally overcome. But like he talks about a lot, is like putting people of color in those things, getting political power does not equate to economic power. Listen to this next clip as Mark Levine interviewed Walter Williams talking about liberty.
That is, they can use liberty to destroy liberty. They can use if you look at totalitarians around the world, they always start out, they are for free speech. That is because they need free speech to get their foot in the door. But after their foot is in the door, they want to eliminate free speech. And you see this all over the country. You'll see this all over the world. And we're beginning to see it in the United States. That is, in Berkeley, that was the seed of the free speech movement. But now at Berkeley, they don't want any free speech whatsoever. So again, I think that we have to be very, very concerned because we're losing our liberty. And if you ask the question, which way are we moving, tiny steps at a time? Are we headed towards more personal liberty or towards more government control over our lives? It'd have to be unambiguously the latter.
So this clip struck me because I've been listening to a lot of stuff that went on, that's going on in China, and that went on, and that's why we studied Mao. Mao would actually get people together, bring them into a place because he wanted to get better. So he said, we need you to air your grievances, tell us where we can get better. Well, guess what happened? That free speech that he was allowing, as soon as they found out that people didn't agree with what he was doing, they were never seen again. They were put into camps or they were just killed. So Walter Williams said it so eloquently. They need free speech at the beginning, but then they don't want it.
Right. That sounds very similar. Me and Brian and I were struggling with this. We've mentioned in our last 2 or 3 videos, along with other conservative podcasters and YouTubers. YouTube, TikTok, other channels like that, they give you this platform to say whatever you want to say until your speech goes against what the left wants you to say. And then all of a sudden they take that free speech from you. But as the left, they're allowed to say whatever they want about Donald Trump and other conservatives. Listen up next as Larry Elder gets to talk to his hero, Walter Williams.
Professor Williams points out that urban parents, based on polls, want choice in education. You know who doesn't? White liberal Democrats.
One of the disgusting things about these white liberals who come out against vouchers, and they come out against tuition tax credits that would give parents, black parents, some choice, they themselves, they send their kids to elite private schools, or they move out to the suburbs. They go to get the higher quality kids. The liberals in our country, the white liberals and black liberals as well, they would not begin to have their kid in Crenshaw High School.
This is really strange because I guess we can say it officially now, our president-elect, at one time, didn't he say he didn't want his kids going to a integrated school because it would be a racial jungle? So he sent his kids off to another private school or a charter school?
Yeah, and this was done in 2018, but I just listened to a news show just yesterday. And again, for some reason, the liberals, the left, who wants all of this fairness, won't allow kids in the inner city have the choice without having to fork out money for a private school, allow these charter schools and these voucher programs. The voucher program seems like the most fair thing in the world. Right. But you know why you're in education. The reason why they don't go through has nothing to do with what these politicians think is fair. It's because their bread is buttered by the unions, the school unions, right. Teachers unions.
Right. So
it's not fair to these kids, and the voucher system would be such a great way to level the playing field.
Yeah, they just don't see it, and it's a damn shame. All right, guys, our last clip of the day is that we're going to listen to Walter Williams talk about how things were really great for blacks back in the past because they had to stand on their own 2 feet and how they achieved greater things than they do now. Listen to this.
That Paul Laurence Dunbar in 1900 and between 1890 and 1900, its black students, and there were no white students at Paul Laurence Dunbar. They'd receive really shoddy financial support from the city. Mm-hmm. Its black students outscored white students in the whole Washington metropolitan area. Mm-hmm. So I think that we're blaming too much on external factors. Well, number one, for kids to get a good education, for any kid to get a good education, whether he's white, black, or purple, somebody must make sure he goes to bed on time.
So to piggyback what Cedric said leading into that clip, just throwing money into a situation by these politicians because they're going to get votes for saying they're throwing money into it doesn't make things better. In fact, Walter Williams has stated many times that this welfare system has made people reliant on the government, and so they don't try to stand on their own 2 feet. Right. And he showed way back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where we know there was way more prejudice and racism against black people, yet they scored better in the schools. So why now are they scoring at the bottom when all the money is being thrown at the system? And we see the schools are still failing. And that goes back to my point before. Voucher systems and charter schools. Why doesn't the left want to allow that? And obviously that's a rhetorical question. We know why.
Right. Well, the day of this filming, I guess I can say this. Happy birthday, Dad. Today is my dad's birthday. We're filming this on what's today? Saturday? Yeah, films on a Saturday. Happy birthday, Dad. So my dad growing up in Mississippi and my mom growing up in Alabama, back in those days, they put a huge emphasis on education. And very little emphasis was placed on sports and extracurricular activities. Very much like a lot of immigrants today. Mm-hmm. You see Asians, you see people that come from Africa, they put a big emphasis on studying, working hard, and they achieved great things. Nowadays, we flip that, and although you see a lot of money are thrown at sports and stuff like that, and new uniforms and new football fields, and we're using books from 30, 40 years ago, and then the emphasis is just lost.
Yep. Go look up some more clips on Walter Williams. He was a great man. More people should know about him, and like Cedric said, in the black community, he should be held in high regard. Not Jesse Jackson, not Al Sharpton.
You guys, do yourself a favor. Take the time to look up Walter Williams and do a little research for yourself. Brian and I have done other clips. Well, one was on Shelby Steele. Maybe he'll put that in the link below. Larry Elder's coming up. There's Thomas Sowell. These are great, incredible men that, for me as a black man, I didn't hear that much about. And I don't know if that information was kept from me intentionally or if why that was. But the more I look at these men, because being a black conservative, you start thinking, am I the only one who thinks that way? Mm-hmm. And so out of fear or just a fear that you're being alone, you don't speak out. But then you realize that there are the Shelby Steeles and the Thomas Sowells and the Walter Williams and the Larry Elders and
the Condi Rices that we don't hear enough about.
Condoleezza Rice and things like that. But then like the other people are like lifted up, like the Al Sharptons and the Jesse Jacksons, and in our state here, the Maxine Waters. It's like I'm getting tired of hearing that stuff. But anyway.
Poverty pimps.
That's my pimp laugh for those of you who didn't know. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Numbers are still rising, and our next video is going to be a very Christmas related video.
But before you go, I don't want you to forget about this.
I'm not going to forget about it.
Okay.
To like?
No.
What? Oh, I forgot about it.
You did forget about it. Yours are right over there.
Oh my goodness, hold on here.
So we do now have our official Cedric and Brian hats. Very high quality. We were selling some on Teespring, but those are very low quality. These are made to fit. So, and there's another one back there for those who, like my wife, grab that one too. For those who have a child-sized head, these are the youth, which you can control with the Velcro on the back. These are fitted. So this is for mine, I get a small medium. He's got a large, extra large for that giant melon of his.
A lot of wisdom.
So please go on to the link in our bio, and I'm going to link this to our this episode. You can support us by just getting these hats. They're well-made hats. You can support us because, as you see, there's no ads on our YouTube. Right. So we can keep doing these.
Yet.
Yeah, not yet. But this is a great way to support us. We'd appreciate it. And again, you can still get our mugs on Teespring.
Right. All right. Well done. Well, anyway, you guys do your little research on Walter Williams and tell us what you think you know about the man. And until next time, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you ring that bell, get your hats just in time for Christmas. And until next time, I'm Cedric.
I'm Ryan. We'll see you later.